All right, so let's go over some of the franchise terms and ownership styles that you need to know. This is actually one module out of our Zero to Profitable franchise system. And there was no point for me to duplicate this as we had everything we need already in the Zero to Profitable franchise system, which is our flagship system that our clients use. So let's go over this. Here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover 8 franchise terms that you must know. Super important. The 4 types of franchise ownership and the 3 styles of ownership, and how to gain even more clarity on the ownership style that will work best for your goals and vision. And so especially for those of you who are trying to figure out, should you own a franchise? Does it make sense? How would it work? Should you keep your job? All of those things, you'll have a lot more clarity after this module. So again, we're starting at ground zero for everyone. So some of this may be basic for you, but stick with us. The program and everything gets more advanced as we go along. So let's dive into some franchise terms that it's important for you to be familiar with as you go through this process of finding the right franchise. So franchisor, we talked about this earlier. Franchisor is the owner of the franchise brand and business system. Franchisors can license their franchise to various franchisees. A franchisee is a person or group who licenses the right to carry out business under a particular franchise trademark. These are just the official definitions. A franchise agreement. A franchise agreement is a document that includes the rights, responsibilities, and obligations of the franchisor and franchisee. So if you buy a franchise, you will sign a franchise agreement. That will be your legal document that you sign that dictates the entirety of the contractual relationship in that document. The franchise agreement, at least the templated one, is inside of the FDD, franchise disclosure document. And so a franchise disclosure document is a standardized legal document that a franchisor should provide every prospective franchisee. Every franchisor, if it is a franchise, must have a franchise disclosure document. There are no exceptions to that, okay? So if a business is a franchise, they have to have a franchise disclosure document. And when you are in the process of looking at that franchise, if you're in communication with them, they have to disclose you with a franchise disclosure document. Actually, fun fact, there's a law around a 14-day cool-off period, meaning you have to sign acknowledging that you at least got the FDD at least 14 days before you can sign a franchise agreement and join a franchise. And that's so you don't make a stupid decision, basically, a rash, emotional decision, give you enough time to sit on it. And so it's mandated by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and it contains details pertaining to the franchisor's finances, history, contract obligations, investment costs, etc. And franchise fee. So the franchise fee is the initial fee that needs to be paid to the franchisor immediately after signing the franchise agreement. Royalty fee. So the royalty fee is a regular payment made to the franchisor either on a yearly, monthly, or weekly, or even daily basis by the franchisee, depending upon the franchise. And in my franchise system, it was weekly. Weekly, they auto-debit it out of our business account. Now, it's usually a percentage of sales for letting the franchisee use their franchise system. There are some franchisors that do have flat fee royalties, meaning it's, let's say, you pay a flat fee of $1,000 or $1,500 a month, and that's the royalty. Some of it may have a combination of a minimum royalty of X number of dollars, but if the percentage winds up being higher, then they take the higher amount. The initial investment. So the initial investment is the money required for a franchisee to open, set up, and operate a franchise business in a particular location for 3 months or more. We'll dive a lot more really deep into initial investment later on under startup cost. We'll actually pull up and screenshot sections from FDDs and outline what all of the startup costs are and really going through that to take a look at it. So this includes the startup and operating expenses. And your term of agreement is the duration of the franchise agreement, typically ranging from 5 to 20 years. And at the end of the term, if the franchisee is performing well, then the franchisor may decide to renew your agreement. Typically, the way that that works is that you get to opt to renew, and unless you've broken some sort of rules or have some sort of major fallout with the franchisor, that renewing wouldn't be an issue. So, actually, something else to cover there. Typically, the renewal fee is a percentage of whatever the current franchise fee is at that time. So, some franchisors say, okay, the renewal fee for existing franchisees after 10 years, 10 years is typically the most common term, then it may be 50% of the current franchise fee. So if the current franchise fee is $50,000, then you would need to pay a renewal fee of $25,000. So those are some of the basic terms that we just covered. The next terms will have to do with different types of ownerships. Now, I do have a video you can watch as a longer explanation in the link below, but this is a quick, high-level overview of the different styles of ownership. So you have single unit franchisee. A single unit franchisee is a person or group who has purchased one franchise location. Pretty simple. Multi-unit franchisee is a person or group has purchased two or more franchise locations. An area developer is a franchisee who purchases the rights to open multiple franchise units within a certain area and specific time frame. Then you also have the master franchise. A master franchising allows people or corporations to purchase the rights to sub-franchise within a certain territory. And so a master franchisee helps the overall franchise company by recruiting franchisees to open units in their territory. So as an example, let's say that I bought the entire state of Florida as a master franchisee for X, Y, and Z franchise. What will happen is in that state of Florida, I am now responsible for recruiting and finding franchise owners to open in Florida because I own the master franchise rights. What will happen is as the master franchisee, I would then collect a portion of those initial franchise fees. I would get to keep those. And then I would get to keep a certain percentage of the royalty fees. And because of that, I would be your first point of contact, you as the franchisee. I would be your primary support, not the larger franchisor. It's an interesting model. And master franchising is the more sophisticated and complex way to get into franchising for, folks that have a higher amount of capital, because typically in order to buy a whole state, or a whole region, and it costs a lot more money, you're going to need a level of sophistication to be able to recruit franchisees. There's more risk, but the upside is also much, much higher. All right, owner operator. So this one is pretty straightforward. You as a franchisee are running the business on a full-time basis. And the franchise owner operator typically work on site most or all days that the business is open, and they directly supervise the help that is needed to run the business, whether it's a retail location or service work that is territory based. But typically, you'll typically have a little time to do other outside work besides keeping your franchise going. Think of this as a full-time job. If you're an owner-operator, your business is your full-time gig. Other employment is practically impossible given the hours you are dedicating to your business. Now, just because you start your business as an owner-operator, it doesn't mean you have to remain in that role. It's very common for franchise owners to build up their business systems and teams and then shift to a semi-absentee role, which is the next one that we'll cover. Generally speaking, if you want to reduce your risk when starting a business, my recommendation is you start out as an owner-operator, especially if it's your first time running a business. Go in, get your hands dirty. You can always get a job later. Again, you can always apply for another job later, but you're going to give your business the highest likelihood of succeeding if you are the running and operating it in the beginning. Now, this can be one of the most profitable ways to run your business initially, but because you keep your labor expenses low, but it's also the most restrictive on your freedom. All right, semi-absentee. So in a semi-absentee model, you typically have a manager or team in place handling most of the actual fulfillment of the business, and you were involved in some or all aspects of running the business at a higher level. Many semi-absentee franchisees begin by keeping their day jobs and relying on the help of a manager to get their first location territory started. If a franchisee succeeds with their first unit and decides to open up additional ones, running the multi-unit franchise may prove lucrative enough for the semi-absentee owner to leave their day job and focus solely on the growing business venture. So this is typically, just a side note, typically not as profitable as an owner-operator business, especially in the early couple of years of the business as it grows. Over time, it's possible to run a very profitable semi-absentee business while enjoying a nice quality of life if you have the right team in place. Executive and absentee. All right, so executive and absentee. So in this model, the franchisee owns the business, but hires out all functions required to operate it, including day-to-day management. So this person often has little or no physical presence at the business location and owns the business purely as an investment, not as a way to create or change an employment situation. So a little bit about this, the absentee model. It's typically going to work if you're a really experienced entrepreneur and you're paying a really good manager and you have experience overseeing managers in this sort of function, or if you have a business partner and they're operating the business, or if you've just been in your business so long, for a long period of time, or at a certain point you become absentee. The investor model is, if you're in here, it's unlikely you'll start in this style of ownership, but typically means you have an operating partner who runs the business, oversees the team, and you're simply seeking a return on capital, either in a percentage of profits, and you have a longer-term goal to eventually sell the business. It can actually be mixed in with the absentee model as well. Again, your ownership model can evolve as your situation changes and your business grows. With my first store that I built in California, I was pretty much an owner-operator for the first 6 months. I was there literally every day. And at the time, I knew that we were going to be moving across the country before we started construction to build a store. So that was my plan, to be active in the business, to be hands-on, get all the systems, teams, and the business running like a well-oiled machine. And then once we moved across the country, almost 9 months later, I took more of a semi-absentee role in the business. I mean, I was literally 2,500 miles away from the business. So I needed to be semi-absentee. But I was still very active in discussing plans with my manager, completing payroll, onboarding and hiring, marketing plans, etc. I just did it on the other side of the country. Within about another 6 to 9 months after that, I shifted into an absentee role. I rarely was involved. I simply checked our numbers and got involved if my manager needed my help or advice. At that point, I delegated all functions pretty much to my manager. They were running payroll. I just needed to approve it. We did have a weekly call to review important KPIs, and that was about it. So as you think about your strategy and plan, just know that you don't need to have it all figured out. Now you can have your initial game plan and adjust accordingly as the time evolves. Plans change, ours did, and when we signed our franchise agreement in 2015, I planned to start with one location, and then if it went well, would open up multiple in California. I didn't realize it would take us 2 years to get open, and by then we had decided to move back to the East Coast to be closer with our families. So like I said, things change. In the next module, we'll dive into some business terms that you'll need to know. So I'll see you there.